Okay, let's get started. How are you? I'm happy to be with you today. Today I'm going to be talking to you about how to draw cosine function in general and the different transformations for this function. So let's get started. Cosine function. To draw this function, we must keep in mind that this function is a periodic function. This means that it is repeating each period. Okay, let's start by drawing y equals cosine x. To draw this function, as you said before from the words, this function that cosine any angle is included between 1 and -1. So I'm going to assume some points for x and find out the corresponding values of y. If I assume some points for 0, pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. And then I want to find the corresponding values of this x's if I plug them in here. Then cosine 0, 1, pi over 2, 0, cosine pi, -1, cosine 3 pi over 2, 0, and cosine 2 pi, 1. What about the period here? Period. The period is, once we get the ending is the same as the starting, here we have 1 and 1, then this represents one period, which is 2 pi minus 0 is 2 pi. And the range here, range of this function is included between -1, the minimum, and the maximum is 1, then from -1 to 1. Let's start to try to draw this function using this curve, with this graph. If I try to draw this function, I'm going to plug these values here on this sheet, and then we have at x equals 0, then y equals 1. Pi over 2, which is equal to pi over 4. Here we have pi over 2, here we have pi in the simplest form, here we have 3 pi over 2, and here we have 2 pi in the simplest form. Similarly, here we have negative pi over 2, here we have negative pi, here we have negative 3 pi over 2, and here we have negative 2 pi in the simplest form. If I'm going to pi over 2 and 0, then pi over 2 and 0 here. Pi and -1, pi and -1. I'm going to use another color. Three pi over 2 and 0. 2 pi and 1. Pay attention. Here we have maximum, mid, minimum. Mid, maximum, then we have minimum. Here we have maximum, then mid, and finally minimum. Mid again, and the maximum another time. Then if I try to draw a curve passing through these points, then we will get the graph of cosine x. Here this is the graph of cosine x. But what about the period? The period is 2 pi, and I can figure out it on the graph. If I draw a line from this point to connect this point, you will see that the length is 8 pi over 4, which is 2 pi, minus 0 is 2 pi. The distance between any two consecutive peaks, or the distance between any two consecutive bottoms at this pi minus pi equals to pi. And then this is a graph of this function. Let's complete our discussion. If I ask you about the general form, and then I'm going to give you an example. More generally, y equals a cosine bx minus c all plus d. This is the general form. Let's take an example. Then a, b, c, and d are constants. Okay, belongs to R. They belong to R, and x is the variable. And then we want to draw a relation between y and x if you are given this figure. For example, draw y equals 2 cosine 2x minus pi plus 1. Here you must find out 5 parts. You must find them: amplitude, period, x scale, phase shift, and vertical translation. What about the amplitude? The absolute value of A, absolute value of 2 if I'm going to compare between them in simplest form 2. Okay, then these are the 5 parts: the amplitude, absolute value of A, absolute value of 2 is 2. The period, 2 pi over absolute value of B equals 2 pi over the coefficient of x 2 in the simplest form, 2 pi over 2 pi in the simplest form. X scale, I'm going to take the period and divide it by 4 in case of sine, cosine, or sec or cosec. Then I'm going to divide the period over 4, which is pi over 4. This is how much I'm going to divide my x-axis. Okay, and what about the phase shift? Phase shift means to put this number equals 0 and solve for x. 2x minus pi equals 0, solving for x equals pi over 2. And the vertical translation, this represents the vertical translation, d equals 1. How to do this function? To do this function, first of all, I'm going to think about the axis or the new axis. This is the same as the cosine, but with the vertical translation 1 is the same as cosine x, but with the vertical translation 1. And amplitude here is 2, and the period is different here from the other period of cosine x. Then first I'm going to draw a straight line passing through 1 parallel to x-axis to draw this function. And this axis, d equals 1 or y equals 1 as called, is going to be or to act as the new x-axis, and is called the midline. Okay, and after that I'm going to define the minimum and the maximum. The minimum means 1 minus 2, the minimum point. This curve is going to bounce or is bouncing between. I'm going to find out the minimum and the maximum. Then 1 minus 2 and 1 plus 2. 1 minus 2 and 1 plus 2. 1 minus 2, negative 1 is the minimum point, and the maximum point here is 1 plus 2 equal 3. Then this curve is bouncing between 3 and negative 1, the new one. And here, what about the phase shifting? Phase shifting means this is a starting point of whenever you are going to do cosine x. Then at this point I'm going to draw a vertical line at pi over 2. A vertical imaginary line, and then here pay attention, at cosine x we started from the maximum, then mid, then minimum. Here if I'm going to draw cosine, then I'm going to start from the maximum, but this represents the new x as the new x-axis. Okay, start from the maximum here, then mid, finally minimum. I'm going to use another color. Mid again, maximum, mid, and minimum. Maximum, mid, minimum, mid again, maximum, mid, minimum, mid, maximum, mid, and finally minimum. Then I'm going to draw a curve passing or connecting these points. Let's first try to draw this curve. Then this curve represents the curve 2 cosine 2x minus pi plus 1. And this curve represents cosine x. Okay. If I'm going to compare between the two curves, then the amplitude is the distance between the x-axis and the maximum point, or the x-axis and the minimum point for cosine x. Here I'm talking about cosine x, okay? Then the amplitude here is 1, but the amplitude here is the distance between the new axis, which is called the midline, and the maximum point, which is 3. Between 1 and 3, then we have 2 points, and this is the same as the amplitude of our definition, okay? Then this point and this point, the distance between them is 2, and this is the amplitude. And how did I divided my axes? Okay, then the x scale, or the function of x scale, is going to is giving you a hint to how you are going to divide your axes. Okay, and then pi over 4 means you are going to divide your axis into pi fourths x-axis. Okay. And phase shifting means the point I'm going to start my graph as a cosine. That you know that the cosine is the shape, has this shape. This is a cosine. Okay? The graph of cosine x, and so on. Then this point is the starting. The starting here, we have the starting point till here, then this represents 1 period. Here I'm talking about, for the red one, for this function, I'm going to talk about the range and the domain. In general, in case both figures, the domain of cosine x and the domain of 2 cosine 2x minus pi plus 1, they are the same, they have the same domain. In both cases equals r. If it doesn't tell you anything or give you any conditions for this function. And what about the range here? From the minimum -1 to the maximum 3, 4, 0, 1. Close interval. And for the black one, the domain R and the range here from -1 to 1. Close interval. Okay, then you have to keep in mind the general form of cosine and keep in mind the 5 parts. They are going to help you. Okay, I'm done now. Until the next time, see you. Bye bye.